right, and we are back with another discussion on many news items that have happened over the past couple of weeks with Jeff Peel. Welcome, Jeff. Good to see you again.
Good to see you again, Klaus. It's been a while. There's been a lot happening over the last couple of weeks, I think, since we last talked.
Right, exactly. So many things going on. It's actually hard to keep up. And I have been a little distracted for the past week. So you are much better informed than I am. I have been following the WEF Davos situation a little bit and a few other things that I want to pick up on. But maybe, there's a lot of stuff that we want to talk about, Jeff, and I know you have a longer list than me. I have a couple of items. But Jeff, let's just maybe first comment on the whole World Economic Forum Davos thing that happened over the past week. One of the things that I've noticed, in fact, is while it years ago used to be, I would say, in some ways fairly mainstream in the sense that people didn't criticize it much, it has been, and thankfully so, has become a subject of a lot of criticism, certainly from, shall we say, the alternative media, right? And for good reason. I know people that don't actually think that the World Economic Forum has any power in this world, and I totally disagree with that. I think these people are overtly advertising their power, however crazy they might be. How do you see that?
I think that the WEF is one of many globalist organizations that probably represents a stream of thought within the wider globalist movement. Whether it's the key mover and shaker is questionable. Mm-hmm. I think organizations like the Trilateral Commission and Bilderberg,
yes,
and of course they share members. Very odd. The people who frequent Bilderberg meetings. One of the steering committee members, for example, is the new. You may have seen that the new Fed chair, Trump's new preferred Fed chairman, has been announced, and of course he's a former steering committee member of Bilderberg Group. And I looked down just this morning. I looked down all of the other members of the Bilderberg Group steering committee in the past. Klaus Schwab is there. People like Michael O'Leary of Ryanair is there. So all of these corporate globalists, typically Zionists as well, appear in all of these circles. The Circle is another group.
Right. So, by the way, Bilderberg, as far as I know, is not public, right? These meetings are secret, as far as I know. At least the WEF is public, as far as I understand.
That's what makes it a little bit more sinister, because obviously, I suppose they love it. They love jetting around. I don't know if you saw the video of all of the private jets arriving at St. Moritz Airport just before the start of the WEF conference. But it's all part of the aura. All the hookers.
I heard about that as well.
They really are a bunch of sad old men, aren't they? Apparently colossi all getting together to run the world, but they need their harem and their private jets and all of the.
That's right. I like to call them kleptocrats.
Success, plotting the future of the world. But I'm inclined towards Patrick Wood's view that a technocratic agenda, which plays to our kind of hobby horse, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If this is a technocratic agenda,
yes,
the people who are most influential tend to be the people who are controlling, are pulling all of the technocratic strings, and they tend to be people from the major technology firms, the Magnificent Seven that we have discussed, people like Larry Ellison, and they're very, very closely aligned with government. I think it's very, very concerning when you have people who are senior or aspirant leaders in government schmoozing around at these events. Keir Starmer, for example, is a former committee member of the Trilateral Commission, and he's now off schmoozing around in technocratic China, making it appear that China, or maybe less so actually, in the past, it's been the case that we've had to see China as an adversary. Meanwhile, we go off onto our Amazon account and order just about everything that we use. All consumer goods are ordered via Amazon and shipped from China. So clearly they're part of the technocratic agenda. So I would say it's unlikely that it's just the WEF. It's this interconnected.
It's a wider group than that, and there are other groups, and as you said, they're more sinister because we don't know what's going on in those. At least WEF, for the most part, is public. It's a public congress, at least with some press there, and I suppose you could potentially even go there as press if there's some freedom to do that. I mean, what scares me the most about the World Economic Forum is to me the one of the most obvious places where, as you said, big corporate get in cahoots with government, right? And that's where they, basically open about, how they're scheming. Essentially, I mean, it's not hard to figure out what the agenda is. They're quite open about it. But this is, the place where big corporates can become members. I don't know. I mean, these, for hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars into this elite group where they get to meet with governments, and then they can then, plot to do whatever it is that they want.
It's very much a venue for corporatism. You're absolutely right, because without the corporates there, and the lobbyists and the bag carriers and the hangers-on and the hookers, that it just wouldn't happen.
Right. So
there is clearly a corporatist agenda. A lot of the big public relations firms there, it's a revolving door as well. The PR firms often will hire media executives or senior correspondents, like from the BBC and ABC and so on and so forth. So there's this revolving door around the lobbyists, the PR firms, the corporates, former politicians. So it's very much a boys' club, a big club, and we ain't in it.
Schwab himself and many of his minions love, all this sort of extreme, I would say, in some cases, sci-fi fantasy tech stuff, right? But let's not be fooled by that. I mean, the direction, I think, is quite clear, even though some of the things do seem to be sci-fi fantasy with chips in people's heads and so on, which I don't believe ever going to work. But I mean, it's quite clear what they want to do. They are extreme globalist technocrats, right? And he loves his fourth industrial revolution and all of that stuff, which is, by the way, concepts have been around for a long time. And I have to admit that originally, maybe 5, 8, 10 years ago, I didn't take it too seriously. I thought, okay, just let them talk about these things. It'll never happen anyway. But we saw, obviously, during COVID, how seriously all of a sudden these things should be taken, because they have every intention of implementing this if they can in any way get away with it, right? So they are in many ways grounds, for me, I think of them as ground zero of technologist control of the world and where these things are discussed, right? So it's a scary organization, but I also am very happy to sense that they're under fire, right? They really are under fire now, and they didn't used to be. So at least that's some positive movement, I think. Don't you think?
Yeah, well, it was interesting, I suppose, in what they tried to present at the World Economic Forum, the most recent meeting, was that there was some fracturing going on, largely because of Trump's positioning. The Greenland debacle and so on was right at the center of it. It was interesting, by the way, that his new Fed chair is the son-in-law Estee Lauder guy, who I can't remember his first name, but he essentially was the beneficiary, of course, the huge Estee Lauder empire worth several billion, and he was the one apparently who whispered in the Team Trump's ear that they should take Greenland. So it's clear that everybody is sort of intertwined around the same initiative, but they try to make it appear that there are fractures. But the most obvious example of that was Carney, the Canadian premier, saying that the rules-based order was fracturing and was broken because of, clearly hinting at the fact that Trump was doing his own thing, and that it was pretty much the world versus Trump, ignoring the fact that we all can see that it's exactly the same agenda. The globalists are clearly steering the agenda. It doesn't matter whether the globalists are in Team Trump or Team Carney or Team Gates. They're the same people with the same agendas, and the agenda is a technocratic agenda. Oh, and by the way, the Chinese are into this as well. In fact, the Americans pretty much set up the whole technocratic agenda within China. Brzezinski, decades ago, was bringing over, I can't remember which chairman it was then, but brought him over to America, wined and dined, as Patrick Wood described it, to create the whole idea that China should become a technocratic fatherland, essentially. So there's all of the stuff about it being like an arms race, an AI arms race of the United States versus China. It's all absolute bullshit.
It
but
is.
You have to go through the motions of making it appear that there are fractures in the world order, and hope that we believe this, but it's clearly utter nonsense.
No, absolutely true. And this idea of China being sort of a communist adversary, I think, is fairly ridiculous. I mean, it's still called the Communist Chinese Communist Party, of course, but there's really not.
COVID, as what did Trump call it? The China flu.
Yes.
Chinese flu or something.
Wuhan flu,
Wuhan flu, and of course, and then the falling down people. All of the Chinese propaganda then was embraced by the West, and we all had to put up with being locked in our homes and having to wear face masks. That was the first instance of the technocratic globalist agenda in play. And they're continuing with that, but they have to make it appear for propaganda purposes that there's some schisms or rifts within this. It's a bit like the nonsense that we had about the rift between Musk and Trump when Trump was newly elected. Apparently he fell out with Musk. That's again, Musk is just simply an actor for the intelligence services, supposedly running Twitter, but in fact, he's simply a puppet of American technocracy.
You wanted to say something about Microsoft as well, Jeff, because Microsoft had some interesting stock market price action this week, and you had a comment about that. I actually haven't followed it myself, but very interested to hear what you think.
This is the thing that gives me some degree of hope, because the markets don't really put up with all of this nonsense. People who are heavily invested into certain assets and asset classes don't want to lose their money. And it was announced a few days ago that, or it came out a few days ago, that 45% of Microsoft's future cloud contracts were from OpenAI. As you know, Microsoft is a contract, a close working relationship with OpenAI in terms of the build out of OpenAI's infrastructure, data center infrastructure. That's the massive boom in the price of NVIDIA chips and also DRAM chips as well, because in order to build these data centers, you need an enormous amount of DRAM chips. Meanwhile, they're all manufactured by 3 companies, including Micron and so on. There's a relatively small number of companies providing most of the world's supply of memory chips, and they're all making an absolute killing. It's like printing money, literally.
Sure. Yeah.
But anyway, it got out that a lot of Microsoft's future cloud contracts were going to come from OpenAI. OpenAI, a company that can't turn a red cent in profit and has no prospect of doing so for decades, probably never will. So it's this circular economy that we have discussed in the past, but coming out increasingly that it is a circular economy. They're all feeding upon themselves. And as a result, Microsoft's stock tanked, making it, I think, about 10, 11, 12%, making it appear, and then all that money moved into metals, and then they tanked pretty much overnight. Hopefully they'll come back again. But it does show that there's a huge amount of volatility in the market and a degree of uneasiness, particularly about the overvaluation of a number of the tech stocks. But But it's wonderful that Microsoft is the sort of bellwether of the bursting of the AI bubble.
Good. You had a few other things that you wanted to bring up, Jeff, I think, about...
Yeah, just on that subject of free speech as well.
Yeah, yes.
There's been quite a lot of focus over the last few days on the apparent success of Upscrolled, which is a new kid on the block, really, and offering an alternative to TikTok. TikTok's, particularly in the United States, TikTok, since it was acquired by Larry Ellison, has been stifling content which is critical of Israel. And as a result, Upscrolled has rolled out a new platform. They're now at 1 million users. They announced that they had reached the million threshold a few days ago. And the company founded by a guy called Issam Hijazi, who I think is originally Jordanian, but his family originally comes from Palestine. I think his grandparents had to leave Palestine at the creation of the State of Israel. And it's interesting in that obviously their focus is on freedom of speech, but of course they're now being criticized themselves for allowing freedom of speech, but only one variant of freedom of speech. So, if the antidote to pro-Israeli content is to create only pro-Palestinian content, it's going to be quite a narrow frame of reference, If only there was some organization that could create a free speech platform and allow free speech, regardless of what people's opinions might be. The difficulty, of course, is that when you have an organization like Upscrolled, I think they're probably going to be the targets of individuals or organizations who want to undermine it.
I mean, it seems so self-defeating to have social media platforms that support any agenda, basically.
Exactly.
I mean, what would be the purpose? I mean, this doesn't seem to have, then it's not social media. It's not media at all. It's just politics, right? And then
well, it does really make you question whether platforms such as X, which we know from the Twitter files experience, was absolutely riddled with intelligence agency operatives controlling the agenda. Sure. But now, of course, is riddled with a version of Trumpism, which is rigging the agenda in the way that it sees fit. And of course, now TikTok, owned by Larry Ellison.
So the question is really, is there ever going to be, because these platforms are created or bought by billionaires of whether it be Musk or somebody else. Is there ever going to be a non-agenda social media that where the algorithm is neutral? Because who would create such a thing without already being a millionaire or a billionaire or something?
Yes, your point is absolutely valid, and the answer might be quite depressing, because, and to go back to the conversation we've just been having about AI, ChatGPT is about to roll out advertising, because they, as I alluded to, they're OpenAI, the owner of ChatGPT, is in debt up to the hill. Well, not in debt, but the amount of equity funding they've received, and also received from their so-called partners like Microsoft, is gargantuan. So, so they're conscious of the fact that they need to produce revenue, and one method of doing that is to advertise. But really, you got to question whether AI, which was supposedly going to be of some benefit for humanity, is going to be of much benefit if we end up just having to pay for it through the back door by advertising. You're going to be doing queries on, like, I have a swollen right foot. What could be the possible cause? And then you're going to be given swollen right foot remedies via sponsorship. It really isn't.
Yeah. And in what way is that going to? Well, in what way is that really going to be any different from what we already have on Google, right? If they're going to do that. So,
yeah. Well, yes, and Google Gemini at least provides the source.
yeah.
I'm not sponsored by Google,
No.
but at least they provide the source material. I think when you use one of these large language models, you know that essentially it is glorified plagiarism. But at least Google Gemini provides the source material, and you go on, it handily provides the links.
Yes.
But ChatGPT, in providing what seem to be definitive answers, even when the model might well be hallucinating, and then also providing sponsor content, is really very, very concerning indeed. The question is whether the end game, given the fact that we have such a fully extended bubble, given the fact that China, apparently our adversary, is coming up with its own large language models and platforms. They're building out similar infrastructure to the infrastructure we have in the West, often supported by exactly the same companies, by the way. But the question is, what is the ultimate aim? Why is there all of this frenetic activity to produce all of this infrastructure around AI? Is it because they are working towards some type of one world government and the ultimate surveillance state? We've heard during the week that we're going to see the rollout of 15-minute cities in the United Kingdom. So essentially smart cities, surveillance communities. Are people going to readily accept this, digital ID, etc.? So it is concerning that nobody in a leadership position in any democracy in the West is willing to stand up, with a few notable exceptions. There are some notable exceptions in the European Union as well. But the question is anybody going to say enough is enough? Even the Reform Party, which wants to return to some type of small England utopia, isn't prepared to say we do not like these moves towards digital ID. So the nationalist parties are not doing us any service either. They're controlled and owned and funded by the same sources, the same people. Sources.
Same people, but I also think they. This is my sense, but I have no evidence of it, to be honest with you. But it seems to me that they, in many cases, start out with some, I think, good ideas as to what freedom of the individual actually means. But then, as soon as they actually get to first base, so to speak, they get captured very quickly, right? They get captured very quickly. I mean, I was actually when Trump first came out with for his second term, and his pre-announcements of all the things that he intended to do before he actually got into office, but he was always elected. I think this must have been November or something like that of 24. I was actually super encouraged. I mean, with the Doge and with him saying, I'm going to stop the war in Ukraine immediately as I'm in office. I mean, there was a lot of good stuff there that I thought, wow, he's been listening to the right people. But it didn't take very long, because we're kind of back to the forever wars, and we're back to him, calling himself out for being a hero for rolling out the vaccine and all this stuff. I mean, it took literally, I think, less than 6 months before everything was back to the usual thing, right? But instead of somebody else, it would be him. And I don't know how the MAGA people actually put up with that. I mean, some of them are obviously very religious about their relationship to Trump, but the sensible ones, and I think there's a lot of sensible ones that said they are very disappointed with his results, because he has not committed to his promises. He has not fulfilled his promises. Many of them have just gone by the wayside. Would you agree with that, Jeff?
Yeah, they're not going to allow some orange crazy guy make up his own mind about any of this stuff. Clearly Trump is a glorified actor, and any senior leader in any Western democracy is exactly the same. The people who own and control the vast majority of the world's wealth are not going to easily relinquish that control of the vast majority of the world's wealth. That's why the organizations that we mentioned at the start of this conversation exist. It's about maintaining control. So Trump is simply mouthing the words that are, like, the guy is an utter idiot. You know, he cannot speak off script, apart from just sort of repeating the same thing over and over again. The guy has never obviously read a thesaurus. It can never come up with a synonym. You know, it's a very interesting aspect of his personality. So he's a glorified actor. And I think it was clear right from the get-go, even in the first term, that that's what he was. And he has surrounded himself with a very similar cast of characters to the previous administration.
Yes.
People who are driven to see the end game. You know, I'm always reluctant to talk about deep state. But in Trump's particular case, it's obvious that there's a deep state. You know, J.D. Vance was positioned to take, position for the vice presidential role, largely as his relationship with Peter Thiel. The PayPal mafia pretty much have the entire Trump administration under their control. And there are many of the positions of power, from Scott Bessent to Howard Lutnick, they're all the same people that were there before in the previous administration and even in previous administrations. And it will always be thus. So Trump is just simply, it's a straight line relationship, as I say, right back to the days of Brzezinski when he was kowtowing to the Chinese and getting them with the technocratic project.
Yeah, there's not, in that sense, not a lot new under the sun. I wanted to bring up one other thing that I've been picking up on. This actually came up on Twitter because I follow probably the only true libertarian in Congress in the United States. His name is Thomas Massie. I don't know if you know him.
Mm-hmm.
He's from Kentucky, right? He's a congressman in the House, right? Elected to the House. And he's straight up libertarian as far as I can tell. And Trump, on many occasions, absolutely hate him because he votes against wars. He votes against spending, right? He votes against state control of many things, as libertarians would, right? He's totally faithful to what he believes in. So he's a hero of mine, and he's kind of in some ways, the successor to the great Dr. Ron Paul, who's still around. I think he's 90 years old now, and candidate for president for many years ago. But anyway, this is what they voted for, which is something. Remember, we talked about the kill switch. We started talking about the kill switch on buses because it was an issue that the buses are Chinese or whatever. This is a vote that in Congress, where Congress has now signed a law that I think funds kill switch technology for private vehicles, for cars. In other words, by 2026, supposedly, and I don't know if it's finally agreed that there's going to be a kill switch in every car. This is the funding piece of it, if you like, that they voted for. And Thomas Massie, of course, tried to stop this, and he proposed a bill to actually stop this longer piece of legislation, right, that had to do with the kill switch. But now they've gone ahead, and Republicans have also voted for this. So now apparently the door has been opened for kill switches to be controlled by government, installed in your car, to be used whenever the state thinks you're incapable or should not be driving your car, right? I mean, this idea is so far gone to me, and that anybody at all could vote for this. And what the argument would be is just an extreme form of government overreach. I just cannot believe that they get away with this thing, right? And obviously, there's all kinds of comments, and they make it a lot easier, of course. When people are driving electric cars, there's a lot more opportunities to control them than, because they're all connected, and obviously old analog cars and whatever. But they're basically, it's just another step in taking away your freedoms. Honestly, I was a little shocked because I was theorizing on the possibility of a government actually doing that, and then poof, you actually see that they're actually actively doing that in the United States already, which is absurd. What do you think, Jeff?
Yeah, it's astonishing, but there's a few things going on. One, they really don't want people to drive any longer. The idea,
Yeah.
the idea that you should drive, and this runs in parallel to the autonomous vehicle argument. That ultimately we're not going to be driving our own cars. We'll just simply be sort of temporarily renting them by sitting in some autonomous vehicle, which incidentally is also utter nonsense as well. I know there's a few autonomous cars operating essentially on rails in San Francisco and certain roads and so on, but the concept of autonomous cars is ludicrous. But it also coincides, this kill switch thing, with a couple of things. One, that Trump doesn't want Chinese vehicles being brought into the United States, not because there's anything wrong with them, because it's going to threaten, obviously, indigenous manufacturers such as Tesla, which, to give it its due, is probably the first company to produce a marketable electric car. Not because of any particular skills on the part of Musk, by the way, because Tesla was already up and running before he supposedly acquired it. But it's interesting too that that Musk recently announced, or Tesla recently announced, that they were going to be closing 2 manufacturing lines in one of their manufacturing plants for the Model S, I think, and one of the other models, the one with the gull wings, the name of which I can't remember, in order to replace the manufacturing product, or the manufactured product on those lines, with humanoid robots, which again is just a total nonsense. They're not going to be doing that. This coincided with an announcement that humanoid robots only have the capacity, the abilities, the productivity of about 40% of an actual human being. That is just
40%.
These things are still being remotely controlled.
Yes, they have 0%
autonomy whatsoever. Frankly, given the choice between a human cleaner, who are often paid way below minimum wage, even in most American states, and are illegal immigrants, over one of Musk's humanoid robots, I would definitely take the human.
It's so far gone. It's so far gone, and it's just unbelievable that a lot of people actually believe that. Even intelligent people believe that to be true. I think it's such an obvious total concoction of nonsense that I just can't believe people can think of that as right. But I mean, it just goes to say, Jeff, that you can make up any sort of nonsense these days. Well, people will readily believe. I don't know what happened to people's minds. Honestly, I look at some of these stories and how can anybody believe that to be true? But people eat it up. I mean, what happened?
We work in tech. I suppose we're used to, I don't know how many product pitches over the years I've had in various roles from organizations claiming they've developed a quantum computer.
Sure.
And I've lost track of the people who were peddling this nonsense to me, but I think if you worked in tech and you know the capabilities of digital technology, you're able to say this is absolute bullshit.
Yes.
If you haven't, and you have to take this deluge of nonsense particularly from social media platforms, and particularly from TikTok. And kids these days are only being exposed to stuff that is lies. It's just absolute torrent of untruths and lies. And we have lost sight of truth. We've lost sight of the ability to look through this bullshit and discover any truths, because there aren't any to be found. And that's why it would be nice if we had, an organization like Upscrolled, redelivering an ability for people to converse in the public realm. But unfortunately, that's not going to happen, in my view.
This is the issue.
We go to the pub and have a pint with our friends.
Yeah.
Pubs are closing as well.
So this is the issue with these untruths, right? Because even engineers or companies that know these things to be untrue I mean, they, to some extent, need to continue because the investors think they are true. Do you know what I mean? I mean,
Yeah.
this is where we are with things, I think, like quantum computing, which I also don't believe to be a thing. It's not, I don't think it's a practical thing. It's been around for a long time, and every so often you hear a little bit about it, and then the investors and the money people say, oh, but we have to start this company that can then counter whatever it is, code cracking capabilities of these quantum computers that don't exist yet, and then they form this other company and whatever, and those people and whomever is involved on the technical side, if they want any role in it, they kind of have to play along, right? Even though they know that it's probably nearly for sure never going to work. So there are these weird sort of de facto lies that people somehow entertain, right, for reasons of, I guess, money and greed, even though they very well know that these things don't exist and will never exist, right? And of course, it's up to every individual to stand up and say, I do not believe this to be true. I will not participate. It's hard for a lot of people to do, apparently. I don't find it that difficult, but it is hard.
I think though, if there is a realization by the markets that most of what is being peddled as AI is clear nonsense, and that AI is not going to replace most jobs, frankly.
Sure. No.
Most jobs relate to getting goods from point A to point B, or plowing fields, or should be, of course. Okay. These are the things that feed us. These are the things that make life good. Growing grapes and making wine and plowing fields and having chickens lay hopefully organic eggs. These are the things that make life wonderful. Sitting down for a meal with your family. These are the things that are more important than the latest pitch, the latest AI pitch. I think if capital is pulled out of the markets, which inevitably will happen if the AI bubble bursts, I think people are then going to have to focus a bit more on real world solutions. The other glimmer of hope is the fact that so many kids apparently are not buying new smartphones. A lot of people are switching back to dumb phones again. A lot of kids are switching off social media, and I think this is a move in the right direction. I think we're always caught in a certain set of circumstances, and we assume that those circumstances are going to remain in perpetuity. That's clearly not the case.
Not the case. Right. But I also believe the kids are actually, at least certainly my kids are super sensible in the way that they're very critical about everything that they hear. And most of the time, when I ask them, do you believe in this? And no, I never believed in that. It's all nonsense. And we actually instinctively agree, despite the fact that I've not discussed it with them. So they are actually, I mean, at least my kids are in very good shape as far as being critical is concerned. I don't know that they all are, but I can certainly tell from my kids and their friends that a lot of the stuff that they're served up to them, they don't believe in. And on occasion, they have to, like everybody else, kind of go along with it, in order to live, right? Because everybody will be basically on their head if they don't agree with these things. But deep down, they don't believe in it, and I think that's very encouraging. So I'm very happy to see that. And as you said, there is kind of a counter movement in, going back to old school phones and all of that. So all of that's good. One thing I did want to mention, and it's a point that was brought up, I forget by whom. I'm following the precious metals market very much because I'm an investor, but there was an interesting point in the investments in commodities have been in production of commodities, right? Including metals, but so many other things as well, have been nearly completely forgotten or repressed for so many years because it's all been tech, right? It's all been tech, and if it's not tech, you don't get any money. One of the reasons why the silver market has exploded is because silver has been at such a low price point for so many years that opening new silver mines has not been possible because it'd be a losing proposition because the price has been so low, right? So now that there's a big demand, there's a big technical demand for silver for cars and electronics, etc., solar panels, whatever it is. There's a huge technical demand for it, and we're in a silver deficit now, right? So there's less is produced than is consumed at the moment. And since there have been no new mines coming out for decades because the price has been suppressed, right? You know, we're out of silver. We're going to be out of silver very soon. It has a huge impact on electronics, for example, or of course on the price, which I'm speculating in at the moment. But it's a general trend of these basic commodities that actually support our lifestyle. I mean, this is the foundation of our lifestyle, that we have oil, right? Food, raw materials of all kinds, metals and whatnot, right? There's very little investment that's going on. They've been hated, right? People hate miners. Why do they hate miners? Because they disrupt the environment. So we're not going to permit this mine there. They're going to, they're going to inflict terrible damage on ancient burial grounds or whatever the case might be. Just generally, they hate them. They don't want them there because nature is sacrosanct or whatever. So these things are now coming home to roost, right? And what's going to happen is, I very strongly believe, it's like we've seen with the silver market. Well, it crashed today, but generally speaking, it's been going up. Commodities are going to see a resurgence because their prices are going to need to come up in order for it to be worthwhile to invest in them. I mean, this is really how I see it. I don't know if you agree with that, Jeff, but I think it's an interesting thought.
No, you're absolutely right. It's not just silver and gold either. You know, it is a lot of those. I think a lot of focus has been on rare earth elements,
yes,
because of the EV market. The fact that China has been demanding so much lithium and or whatever they need. But I think refocusing on the basics, even copper, the copper prices have been going up, palladium prices have been going up. But yes, it's at least it is refocusing on fundamentals, and that's, I think, a move in the right direction. But it's also focusing on the manufacture of value-added products and not just digital technology.
Sure.
I think the software industry has sort of hijacked the term technology. Even I'm guilty of this. I've mostly worked in software for most of my working life. And, we kind of hijack that term. Digital technology equates to technology. It doesn't. No. And engineers are the heroes, really, aren't they? Because they're capable of coming up with incredible solutions to some of the most intractable problems. And against all odds often, because you're right, the green lobby typically rails against miners and people who are trying to get commodities that are needed, so that the protesters have mobile phones that they can use.
That's right. That's exactly what it is. All right. Very good. It's really good to see you. I don't know. I kind of felt that maybe we should. So one of the things I think maybe people need to do, and I don't know if they still do it, I really think people that read books are way ahead of anybody else, right? We still need to read books, Jeff. I don't know how many you read. I try to read as much smart, clever books or intelligent books as I can. And because I guess my fundamental premise is, if we're going to change anything, we first of all have to, convince people on the battlefield of ideas of what is good, right? And what will work and what will not. I mean, I'm a huge fan. I don't know. Do you know Milton Friedman, by the way?
Mm-hmm, absolutely. In fact, my son, not knowing that I'm from Milton Friedman's era, studied economics at university and was a big Milton Friedman fan and read everything. And he did actually a TV version of Freedom Shoes.
I was going to mention that because that's still available. You can Google it on YouTube. It is an amazing series. It's from the late 70s, I think. And not only does he narrate his own, which is basically essentially this book or some form of it. He narrates, I think, 8 or 10 episodes, right? But after that, he has excellent discussions, which you could do at that time. You don't get them anymore, but at the time, you could actually sit across from a committed communist, essentially, and actually he asked to be, to invite people with the contra reviews into the studio and have this discussion, and a super interesting and extremely well argued, I guess, from both sides, but obviously he always ends up winning because he was a very, very clever a person and capable of countering all of these socialist arguments, essentially, right? So these are excellent programs. I recommend the book a lot. Free to choose, and it's probably like, I don't know, $10.
Yeah, one of the guests he had in the studio was Neil Kinnock.
Yes.
Many years ago, and Neil Kinnock essentially was arguing against Friedman's view of monetarism, money supply being at the root of the problem, really, because little did Friedman know that US debt was going to be at 38 trillion in 2026. But you never hear any of the so-called libertarians, even though Elon Musk will regularly tweet, memes featuring Milton Friedman. He doesn't talk about US debt at all. Jerome Powell is just about the only person of note who's been talking about US debt, and he's about to be kicked out to be replaced by a technocrat. But it's never mentioned. Debt as the basis of taxation, inflation as a form of taxation was the argument, the synthesis of Friedman's argument. Never mentioned these days, because technocrats are dependent on printing money. That's the way they control. That's the way they maintain the hegemony.
That's exactly right. That's exactly. Super highly recommended, and also the TV series is absolutely fantastic. I've watched it several times because there's just so much good material in that, and so much good argumentation, basically, right? Argumentation on why he in one episode he goes to Hong Kong, right? At that time, Hong Kong was independent, completely free, and practically very, very few regulations. People could do what they want. He said every day people vote with their feet. In what direction? When they open the border to China, everybody streams into Hong Kong, right? Because they go there for a better life. Nobody goes in the other direction. At that time, obviously, China was a lot more communist than it is today. But it's stuff like that. It's really, really great. And I really think we should, encourage people to read the classics in this sense. And
just to plug a book I've been reading, I've been reading a lesser known title by George Orwell called Coming Up for Air, and fascinating read, because what Orwell does in that book is he wrote it in 1 year before the start of the Second World War. It was published, I think, by Victor Gollancz a year before the Second World War, and of course he had gone through the First World War, and essentially he's writing. It's a fictional work, but it's partially autobiographical, and he's looking back wistfully at his childhood years, deeming these to be the perfect, the world of his childhood he regards as utopia, and of course the world of war he regards as the ultimate dystopia. But it's interesting, as we are on the verge of war, possibly with Iran, all as a means of increasing the US hegemony. A lot of what Orwell writes in Coming Up for Air really resonates in 2026 as much as...
I've got to read that. I haven't read it. It's good. It's good. And it's good to encourage people to really study these things, right? Because we need to prepare. I myself, until the COVID insanity, I wasn't particularly interested in politics, to be honest with you. But after that, after realizing what they did to us, is that we can't live like this. We need to prepare. We need to prepare intellectually. We need to stand up for our rights, all of these things. And I've always been inclined in that direction, but I wasn't very active because I just wanted to take care of my business, basically, right? But I think now is the time for us to really think about these things, take a stand, be courageous, study, and as the good Martin Armstrong says, hopefully we'll become the founding fathers of whatever comes next. And we really need to think about these things, right?
Absolutely.
Jeff, it's great to have you, my friend. Thank you so much for spending the time, and hopefully a lot of good people will watch this and agree or disagree, right, with what we're saying.
Agree or disagree, yeah, that's what it's all about. Please comment. We're putting these videos on LinkedIn, on Substack, on X. We will even put it on Upscroll and give it a try.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's see how things pan out. But please do comment and let us know what you think.
Yeah.
Two old gits who chewing the fat, but I think it's important. I think people have to do that.
I think so. Definitely.